The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. 24 people could be forced to the streets this week as funding for a shelter in Nanaimo is set to expire. The nonprofit Risebridge has been operating a shelter on Prideaux Street since the fall, funded by BC Housing on a temporary winter shelter contract. On February 12th, Risebridge reached out to BC Housing to inquire about the possibility of extending the shelter contract. 2 weeks later, on February 27th, they were informed that BC Housing was reviewing extension requests across the province and would follow up with updates. After Risebridge followed up a month later on March 28th, they eventually received a reply from BC Housing's Director of Homelessness on April 17th, which stated that, quote, "This year BC Housing does not have a funding program to invite all nonprofit operators to apply for extensions to provide broad operating extensions for all the temporary winter shelters across the province," end quote. Another shelter in Nanaimo, run by the Nanaimo Family Life Association located at 55 Victoria Road, received an extension to May 31st. Deronda Bennett has been staying at the Risebridge shelter. I visited the site and spoke with her on Tuesday morning.
I'm Deronda Bennett, and I stay at the shelter here at Risebridge.
And can you tell me when you found out that the funding for the shelter could be running out?
They've been very upfront and honest with us right from the beginning. So I was told when I got here about 6 months ago that it could possibly be running out around now, but that they've been working hard to try and keep it open all year long and working hard to find us housing along the way too.
If the funding runs out tomorrow when the shelter has to close, what does that mean for you? What happens next?
That means that I either find another shelter to go to, which scares the life out of me, or I happen to be one of the very lucky ones who have a child that is willing to take me in, but because of circumstances in my life right now, I'm not really prepared to do that. So it's either another shelter or the street for me, really. When you say another shelter is really scary as a prospect for you, could you tell me more about that? Why? I've been to a few shelters here and I've had really bad experiences. The first one I ever went to, I had a bad experience with a man that started stalking me once, and they didn't do much about it. And then the next one I went to, there was just so many people that I didn't know. It was really overwhelming. So I fainted a couple times, and that was a little embarrassing, and I had to go to the hospital. So it's not been until I came here that I felt like I was safe and these people have become my family. So, and not judged either for any of my extracurricular activity that I'm having a hard time with ever since my daughter and my dad died. So that's what sort of led me here. What is the process like for you? You know, I was talking with Kim, who volunteers here, and she was saying one of the things that they try to do is help people with applications or get on some of the wait lists for longer term housing. Yeah. Is there anything you can tell me about how you've experienced that? Yeah. I have filled out the forms and did the BC Housing VAT form, and Siobhan has been trying really hard to find me and my husband a place that we can go together, because they don't really have places for couples to go together. They found that it doesn't really work out with fighting and whatever else, right, that goes on. But she did let me know that she could place me in one of the two rather not so nice places, Labio or Newcastle. And we're trying really hard to get me and my husband into the new Sorrow building. Or Sparrow building. That's not a wet building, it's a dry building, because we've been really trying hard to get off drugs and get on the Supplicate shot. So that might happen for us. They've done everything that they possibly can, actually. They keep in contact with everybody and letting us know where we're at on lists and stuff like that. So they're trying really hard for everybody not to be out on the street if it comes down to that, which it hopefully doesn't, because this is the only place that I've been that really feels like a family. They help you with, clothing, and they feed you really well, and they don't judge you here at all, which and made me fall in love with all of them. I love everyone that works here dearly, and I think that they love us too. So even though people come and go every week, there's been a core group of people that have been here for as long as I've been here, and they all feel the same way, that this is the best shelter that the city has. So, yeah.
If you could have a conversation with some of the decision makers at BC Housing, what things would you want to tell them? What questions would you want to ask of them?
Well, I would like to ask them why they haven't funded places like this as much, or done their due diligence on how we feel about places like this, because the people that I know that have stayed out of their shelters that have come here have said that how different this place is, right? It is like a home. They say welcome home when you come to the door every night, right? They make sure that you're right down to you're happy with the blankets that you get on your bedding, right? And I'd want to know why they spend their time wasting money on places that aren't like this, and why they don't model other shelters after this model, because this one seems to be the one that worked the best for me. And I'm not really a picky person. I realize I put myself here when it comes down to it, but this is the only place that's ever felt like home, which it's been a while since I've had my home. And they let me and my husband, be together, not be together, but, they encourage us to stay together, whereas other places have not so much, like other churches have not so much. So I would just want to know why they haven't made an active effort to come here and see this place and find out why people like it as much as they do, and like it above and beyond the other ones, because they seem to have no problem funding those ones, but yet this one doesn't get funded as well as the others do. And they do feed us very well and keep care of us really well. And I mean, my birthday was just the other day, and they even had cake and everything, and everybody sung happy birthday, because it is like a family, right? And it's been like that with everybody else's birthday over the last 6 months too. So I would like to know why they haven't even bothered to be here to see what's going on, right? It's worth checking into this one as well as it is every other one, right? So it would be nice if they could do that and actually ask us why we like this one as much as we do, because it's definitely worth keeping open. It is.
Is there anything else you'd like to let people in Nanaimo know about the situation?
Everybody's story is different. We all have a story. We all, in the beginning at least, didn't want to be here. And we're not bad people. And places like this give us hope. And without hope, all you have is sadness and no hope, which brings about everything they don't want to see: crime and, more drug addiction and more alcoholism. And, places like this actually keep us grounded. And you don't find people that stay here out doing crime. They come home right at, we can't wait to get home. And we're out there in the community just trying to do things the right way so we can be housed, and so we don't let the people down that run this place, because we love them that much. So yeah, it's a place worth keeping open. It is.
Deronda, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you.
Deronda Bennett has been staying at a shelter run by Risebridge, which could be forced to close as temporary winter shelter funding from BC Housing expires on April 30th. While I was at the shelter site Tuesday, I also spoke with Risebridge volunteer Kim Coulthard.
Last year, the same thing kind of happened, where they had been requesting an extension to go through the summer, and year-round really is what they ask for every year. and each year it's been denied. This year being no different, even in spite of the fact that, from what I understand, Sheila Malcolmson and Lisa Marie Barron, when Lisa Marie was our representative, were very hopeful, and they'd been having communication with the BC Housing that we were going to be extended. And then Rise Bridge received a letter saying, hey, and it was really, it seemed like a really insensitive letter. It was signed off with cheers when you're talking about a really serious thing like people's lives, and you sign off saying, sorry, you're not getting any money, cheers. This is the letter from Allison, who is the Executive Director, Homelessness BC Housing Operations, basically saying, first, I want to thank you for providing shelter spaces to Nanaimo community throughout temporary winter shelter, blah, blah, blah. You're closing on the 30th. Shelter closures are an annual occurrence, and while there are some folks who do not have continuity of shelter, the temporary winter shelter program provides shelter during the coldest, wettest time of the year. This year, BC Housing does not have a funding program to invite all nonprofit operators. So that is I don't know what that means, to invite all nonprofit operators. So does that mean that they can't invite all of them, or they're only inviting some of them? That's kind of ambiguous to me. I don't know if it sounds ambiguous to you, but and then it says, we want to thank you for your adaptability, commitment, and perseverance in providing space to ensure people would have access to resources during the coldest times of the year. Cheers, Allison.
So there are 24 people staying there right now. I understand it's full, like there's a waiting list.
Always a waiting list. Every day there's a waiting list. You can show up here at 7 o'clock and see if there's a space available. And Tuesday mornings, when we're primarily and solely operated by volunteers between 9 and noon, because we do not have funding to be open during the day, so we come in as volunteers and do this. People can apply for a shelter bed. They can also get connected to other services. Rise Bridge has been working really, really hard to try and get a lot of our guests into more permanent housing. Some of the temporary places, the one on Nickel Street and the one on Labio, we've been successful in getting a couple of people in. But some of the newer places that are coming up, a lot of our folks don't qualify. They're some of the hardest to house people. We're a low barrier shelter. You have to do something pretty bad to be banned from coming here. So we accept people on how they show up at that particular time, on that particular day. If they're asked to leave because of incidents or some kind of behavior, they're always welcome to come back and see how they present the next day. This is not typical of some of the other shelters. So I just think it's really important that not everybody is going to fit into the mold and to the rules around some of the newer places that are opening. There's always going to be people who are going to be rejected from those places, so there needs to be other temporary, or I should say full-time spaces such that Rise Bridge offers. And also the Hub was offering as well. They're going to be closing down. I think they got an extension until the end of May, and they have 20 spaces available, and that's every day is on a first-come, first-served basis. Whereas here you can sign up, you sign a contract, a behavior contract, and you're allowed to stay, I think, for, it's supposed to be 30 days, consistently. And then, I guess they try and make room. But anyway, all I know is that what I see is at the beginning of the season, people who are really quite sick, mental health wise and physical wise, who gradually over the winter their health improves, they build community within our little organization, they start to contribute by cleaning and helping to organize. I do my shoe program on Tuesday mornings. There's like always people lining up to help me bring my shoes in and set up. A lot of gratitude, and we've seen some success stories, which I think is the most important thing, is the success of the programming here.
What is going to happen to the people who are staying here if the funding dries up?
They're going to be sleeping outside, and really with no survival gear. Most of the people here, the only thing they have are like the clothes in their bin, like they're allowed to have a bin, clothes on their backs, no tents. There's no sleeping bags. They used to have a program that was run by CMHC that was downtown. They were open at one point. It was Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then it changed to Mondays and Wednesdays, where they were sponsored by, I think, the Hearth and Home program, and they gave out survival gear, and you were allowed to go there every 2 weeks. And that program no longer exists. So people are going to be leaving with just whatever they have on their backs and trying to find a place to lay their head. In my opinion, that's where crime is going to increase. Crimes of survival, people breaking into people's garages or whatever, just to find things that they can use to survive, tents or sleeping bags. Food, I mean, we offer food here. People aren't going to have access to the food that we serve here through our program. There's breakfast served and dinner is served. And then on Tuesday mornings, people can come and get snacks and things like instant oatmeal and drinks and protein drinks and such. That's not going to be available anymore. So no food, no shelter, no community. And it's a really dire situation.
Kim Coulthard is a volunteer with Risebridge. A shelter Risebridge has been operating since the fall faces closure as its contract with BC Housing expires at the end of April.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
Funding for a 24-bed shelter in Nanaimo is set to expire at the end of Wednesday, April 30th, leaving guests facing an uncertain future. Operated by Risebridge and funded through BC Housing on a temporary winter shelter contract, the facility is located at 520 Prideaux Street. I reached out to BC Housing to talk about the situation.
My name is Heidi Hartman. I'm Associate Vice President, Supportive Housing and Homelessness for BC Housing.
And can you provide me with an update on the funding situation for the shelter that's being operated here in Nanaimo by Risebridge?
I can certainly do that. I would start by offering that there were actually 3 temporary winter shelters operating in Nanaimo. So 2 in addition to Risebridge. The first was the Hub, which is operated by Nanaimo Family Services, the Risebridge Shelter, and also St. Peter's Church Shelter. So those were all temporary shelter beds that were opened during the wettest, coldest time of the year.
And so the funding is set to run out at the end of April, correct? That's my understanding. That's still the case?
That's correct. So temporary winter shelter funding is time limited. The contracts the operators sign stating that shelter funding would end the end of April.
What is the situation? What is the plan or the expectation for what will happen to the 24 people who've been living in this shelter as of tomorrow?
Certainly, our operators and other outreach partners in the community work with folks in the shelter to do what they can to ensure housing continuity or shelter continuity. Unfortunately, there's more need than available shelter or supportive housing. And that's why the province is going to be updating community in the coming weeks about the announcement of approximately 150 temporary housing sites that will open up in Nanaimo this spring and summer. In addition to that, there'll be, in addition to the 150 temporary housing sites, there's also permanent housing that's already been initiated, including 60 supportive housing units on Mackenzie and 20 complex care housing units, which is a really good news story because the city of Nanaimo has been indicating the need and the want to be able to support opportunities with more health-oriented supports in supportive housing.
It's my understanding that some of the new units that were supposed to come on with the Heart and Hearth program have been delayed in opening. Has there been any planning as regards to perhaps extending some of the temporary shelters that exist until those buildings, which I understand had been set to come on earlier around now, until those sites are open?
You're quite right. We have been able to extend the hub shelter, which is additional beds to align to the temporary housing sites that will be opening up this spring and summer.
My understanding is that Risebridge was notified that this funding would be running out and there was nothing else they could apply for, with just 9 business days to go before the closure, and that this year they've had one 15-minute site visit from BC Housing and a total of 3 emails. Has this provider received equitable treatment relative to other nonprofits?
Absolutely. I can share that provincially, all of our temporary winter shelters have received the same type of contract as Risebridge. That's why we're very clear in the contract of a start and end date. And it's my understanding that Risebridge were confirmed when they did reach out that there was not the opportunity to extend the contract beyond what had already been agreed to.
So how come in the case of, you mentioned the hub has been extended by another month. What is the difference in the situation? How did that decision get made?
It's always a very tough decision. We took a look at where the opportunities are and the limited amount of funding, and the decision was made to be able to support the hub site with an extension. We recognize that there is need in Nanaimo, and we were really pleased that we have the opportunity to be able to extend the shelter, one of the shelters, beyond the regular time frame.
It's my understanding as well that there are 63 year-round shelter beds in Nanaimo. Some of those have specific conditions, such as, being for men only. The 2023 point-in-time count suggests that there are 515 people living in homelessness, and the Systems Planning Organization suggests that that's a vast undercount. The real number is likely 800 to 1,000. Does the city of Nanaimo receive equitable treatment relative to other communities when it comes to allocation of funding for shelter spaces?
Absolutely. BC Housing takes a data-informed approach to how, whether it's shelter funding or supportive housing funding, is allocated across the province. So we use the data like the point-in-time counts. We take a look at shelter occupancy, very important data points to be able to inform how new supportive housing sites are allocated.
As part of the decision-making process on whether to allocate funding to a shelter or extend funding to a shelter, does BC Housing visit the shelters and speak with any of the people who stay there?
We always do our best to get out to the many sites. For your information, there's actually over 1,300 temporary winter shelter beds across the province. So our staff do whatever they can to get out to the sites. It's not always possible to do on a regular basis, but that's part of why we also have very strong community partners who, may also provide information to us on how the shelter is operating, what the needs are community. We can't do our work on our own, and that's where community partners are so invaluable to the work that we all do.
Is there anything you would say to any of the people who are living in the shelter right now who, as things stand, would have to find somewhere else to go in Nanaimo as of Thursday?
We always encourage folks to ensure that they have active applications and up-to-date housing applications so that when permanent or temporary housing opportunities are open, that they're on the list to be considered. BC Housing funds outreach workers within Nanaimo, and we've got community partners who are actively collecting that information so that when housing resources come online, the coordinated access table can actively consider folks who are in need of supportive housing in Nanaimo.
And if there are folks who do get evicted from supportive housing, what happens to them? What are the provisions in place to help them and to help everyone living in the community?
Well, I would say our nonprofit partners who operate supportive housing really do everything they can to preserve tenancy. Eviction is only a last option. In fact, one of the outcomes for supportive housing is to ensure housing stability for people. And, that's why options like the complex care housing that is coming to Nanaimo at Boxwood is a really good option, because we know that there are folks that need supports that are beyond what's offered in supportive housing. And that's why BC Housing, with our city partners, our island health partners, community partners, are really working to ensure that there is a variety of housing options in Nanaimo to address the variety of needs that are in the community.
Is there any other important context you think people in Nanaimo need to know about the funding running out to this shelter and 24 people being sent to the streets as of this week?
I'd again just highlight we do whatever we can to ensure continuity of housing. But the really good news is the number of housing units that is going to be opening up in Nanaimo. 150 units is quite significant. And then if we think longer term, the permanent supportive housing that will be opening on Mackenzie, as well as those critical complex care housing units.
Heidi Hartman, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Heidi Hartman is Associate Vice President, Supportive Housing and Homelessness with BC Housing. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
This program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.